So tell me, how long have you been composing on piano, and what were kind of like your early passions and influences?
I don't quite know exactly how it started, but I know from about the age of 11 or 12, I was kind of improvising, like mostly just simple arpeggiated music, um, riffing with the music of the composers that I was playing, people like Yurima and Yantis and Einaudi,
Mhm.
um, and then a few like sort of simple classical pieces. And then I think it just kind of spiraled from there. I was always kind of lazy when approaching practice. So I used to um, get distracted quite easily, I think. I mean, I loved having a piece polished and like performance ready, but the process of getting there was sometimes quite a tedious thing. So I I would sort of pad out my practice sessions with improvisation sessions that would kind of go on for hours and hours. And in that respect, kind of learn by playing in both the like the piano playing sense, but also by in the sense that it was just kind of fun. It wasn't study.
Does it become study later?
Yeah, I think so. I think since I decided I wanted to do this professionally,
Yeah.
there's been like, yeah, definitely an element of, okay, the practice stuff is as important as the creativity. You've got to
Mm.
have both the technique and the
The
sort of the
flair, the
inspiration kind of
enjoyment.
side.
Are there some things when you're kind of like reimagining stuff? Does it? Because when I write, I I often like block out. I kind of write on a Word document. I write like a 10,000 page short story or whatever, and then it eventually becomes a really bad first draft, and I'm just happy to get anything down, um, and then over a period of a long time, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just wonder how how your kind of process is, and how does are there some bits that you get instantly and then you kind of skip over and then you come back to and you're always reworking? I mean, or do you, or is it quite theory based, or do you have to be sitting at a piano to kind of work things out? How does it work for you?
I think ultimately all the decisions I make are kind of intuitive.
Hmm.
Um, I think my process is quite similar to yours. I think it's a kind of tried and tested process.
Hmm.
Get ideas on the page, or in my case, it's some of my voice memos.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's like a continuous process of editing and trying different things, different combinations. Sometimes I end up exactly where I started, having tried out loads of different combinations. I actually
Yeah.
revert back to the
First
original,
instinct.
which is funny. But
Yeah.
you've got to try these other options to finally get to what you're happy with. And usually with my pieces, actually, there's no like true definitive version.
Mm.
Um, when you release a piece of music, obviously there has to be, a final version, final. Um, and if you release sheet music as well, then there has to be a definitive version. It can't all be improvised.
Mm.
But all of my pieces, including the reimagined pieces and the arrangements, all exist in sort of loads of different arrangements. I don't
Yeah.
think that will ever kind of change.
And you were just mentioning the kind of like broad range of, your reimagined pieces and, well, on the line, film and TV composing. And is film and TV composing something you really wanted to do?
I would say actually my first passion is the music, and I think unlike some film composers, they are film composers.
Mhm.
I am someone who composes who also likes to work with films, but I think it's kind of the music first. So I'm sorry if that slightly bursts the bubble, but I guess that's like one string to the bow rather than my
Mhm.
specific passion. But when there's a film where piano really lends itself to it, as I think was the
Mhm.
case with the end credit of this film,
Mhm.
then yeah, it's a really exciting creative opportunity because I'm using the kind of music which I'm writing on a daily basis anyway. So it's kind of familiar, but then there's the creative tension, good tension
Mhm.
that comes with having some other kind of medium which you're responding to and you have to be sensitive towards. So it's an interesting balance. I haven't done much composition for film before, and this was incredibly enjoyable and actually quite stress-free when it came to the compositional process. The main theme sort of just poured out of me with incredible ease. It was actually very satisfying.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And it was actually you who titled the piece "A Meadow of White Flowers." I had, that and I wonder if that had any symbolism. And I mean, of course it does. I mean, I wrote the script and I
yeah,
put a meadow of white flowers in the script.
yeah,
So it's lifted from the kind of the last line of the dialogue. Um, and it's that reminiscence, it's that memory, it's very Second World War esque. When there's poppies and white
yeah,
flowers and that was for Harold in the script. That was what he enjoyed doing. That's where he found solace. And um, is it and was it a very natural kind of title you gave the your piece, being credit?
yeah. I think I honed in on that line quite quickly because it had both literal and metaphorical um,
Mhm.
value, I guess, or similarity to the kind of piece that I wanted to write. Because you have at the end two protagonists in a virtual conversation, and they're two stories, whilst completely different, still kind of reach the same cathartic focal point. So for
Mhm.
Harold, without giving too much away, the Meadow of White Flowers is a literal, it's like his happy place, essentially his safe space.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it does have, like historical significance, as you say, the poppy fields and Harold's own personal background with trauma. Um, hope I'm not giving too much away there. But then also the main character as well. Uh, and she has her own inner demons and her own trauma. And the film, through her actions, through what she's able to achieve during the process of the film, the meadow of white flowers metaphor is something she's able to achieve as well. Some kind of peace, I guess.
Mm. It is, yeah. And
There's an interesting juxtaposition between the closeted film, which is all in one very small space,
mm,
and the fact that the conversations are all happening virtually. We only ever hear, we only ever see one of the protagonists. The rest is all, wired in through the phone, and so the film is very very closed. It's very um, claustrophobic, whereas the Meadow of White Flowers is just the total opposite. It's like this sort of infinite space that you can be free and be peaceful in. And that's kind of the shift which happens just when the film ends into the end credits. Or actually, maybe over the course of the last scene with Matthew Collings' score, which gets kind of increasingly broad and ethereal and spacious. We go from this claustrophobic, kind of anxious score into this more expansive world. And then the piano piece comes in and kind of rounds off that
I'm
narrative.
right in thinking. No, you tell me if I'm wrong, but there Matthew Collins uses the piano in one of the early scenes, and actually it kind of recurs later on as well, in the kind of the middle. And I think you might have taken the chord, the same chord from that. Am I right in thinking that,
Not
or
from the piano part. The end
not
of
from the
the end
piano
of the piece
part?
is an F sharp minor,
Yeah.
and so I wanted it to segue very naturally from the end of his score to the end credits piece to feel like it was, whilst it's completely different instrumentation, still had to feel like it was a natural
Mm.
continuation of that emotion. So it's in the same key, but I don't know if it's the same.
There's no piano earlier on. I
I think
thought,
there is piano. I just don't remember.
yeah,
I can't
maybe
remember
I'm
what it is.
maybe it's a connection in my head that's not there, but
Right.
because it's the kind of the piano, like I feel like we introduced it maybe earlier on,
It
but
is, yeah, I suppose it's kind of foreshadowed.
it kind of foreshadowed
Yeah.
exactly, and then it builds in at the end. The first time you saw the film, it was probably a locked cut, I think, rather than you weren't, it wasn't the script stage, it wasn't anything like that. You had something tangible to kind of look at. And was there anything about the film in particular that you were drawn towards, whether it was the characterization, or it's just the kind of the plot, or it was a tense thriller, or you just liked the one room element of it? Was there anything you really liked
I
about
mean,
it?
there was a few things. I mean, there was the kind of quaint, charming, old English. It's based in Alderney, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, and it's got that kind of sort of Downton feel, I suppose, with the period voices, and the main character has this incredible enunciation, um, very English feel. Um, that was something which I was thinking about with the Meadow of White Flowers. I was thinking of like Vaughan Williams, who composed a lot of English sounding music, or at least maybe he defined what English sounding symphonic music would be for the next 100 years. So that was one aspect, and then the thriller aspect, and then the plot and the various plot twists that definitely draws you in as well. It's a
Um,
theme. It's a theme which continues throughout the piece. So I suppose the main challenge of the piece, actually, the more dynamic sections came quite easily, um, as well. The challenge, I think, was to find new ways to vary the main theme, so that the piece has a sense of continuity, but also variety, which I think is perhaps the most important thing when you're writing any piece of music, finding that balance between continuity and variety, familiar versus new.
yeah, it's always bringing on new material, and you're kind of always continually pushing boundaries. And you're also pushing yourself and your kind of own personal development. I hope you don't mind me mentioning you're in Berlin this week, doing, you know, out on a course, pushing yourself again. And does that kind of experimentation, is that something you're really kind of working on at this month that you're away, or is this, just a continuous process for you? I mean, what's your kind of current headspace at with your work?
That's a good question. I think as all creatives know, there's periods of input and periods of output.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're like all ears and you're taking in information and new ideas. You're looking at other film writers, other musicians, you're listening to recordings, or studying techniques. And that's when you're kind of stretching yourself. And then you have to go through a period of output. Then this is when you actually using those new tools have to then create something. This is kind of my experience. It's very difficult to do both, because I think the downside of the input, and it's essential. You've got to have that input time to grow and to challenge your own assumptions, and to take risks. The downside is that you can end up doing the kind of comparison thing. You're listening to all kinds of different music. You're maybe thinking about your own skills and your place within the industry, perhaps. So that can be the downside of the input, but it's still essential. And then the output is when you use your new skills to create
It's
whatever it
interesting. I
is.
hadn't really thought of it as such, but some of my
Yeah,
best work or best periods are after a gap of almost emptiness. I'm going to call it emptiness, but I need space to kind of like dream creativity and play around with ideas and get things wrong. Um, and so for me, yeah, and then there's like a short burst of kind of output, and then you're kind of exhausted by it, and you need to go back to just go back to the drawing board and kind of cart some more ideas again. Um,
that's very interesting, because I have the same thing. I try and do regular practice, sort of daily technique and those sorts of things. But sometimes I find if I don't play the piano for 5 days, first the very first time I sit back at the piano, I come up with the most creative idea I'd had for a month.
yeah.
It's interesting that you have the same.
I mean, it's similar. Oh, I'm feeling tired now. So you go to bed and then you 10 ideas come at you at once.
Right, yeah.
And you're like, this is annoying. But I think every creative, kind of, it comes at 3 a.m. in the morning. It comes at times that you like, no, why can't it come at a sensible time?
Exactly.
But you just hit with it.
I think creatives in general kind of have, I don't know, problematic sleep patterns because of that. It's just a occupational hazard, I think.
Yeah, the notepad on the phone, and you open up the note the next morning, you're like, what was that writing?
I sometimes kind of wake up at 4 a.m. and start singing into my voice memos. In my head at the time, it sounds great. I think, oh, future me is going to know exactly what I had intended. And then I wake up in the morning, it's just a mess. I think, what on earth was that? It is lost forever.
Yeah. But yeah, there was probably an essence of that you've forgotten that was amazing, because I find that I kind of like get the essence down and then I've kind of just missed a bit about it. And then but sometimes it's great. Sometimes it is great, and especially when you get to a kind of a roadblock, it just really works well. You somehow overcome it when you're least expecting to overcome that roadblock.
Did you
Um,
have that with On the Line?
Multiple
Roadblocks.
times. I mean, the kind of the challenge with writing it was how do you keep it entertaining? Because you've only got one room, you've only got so much kind of space to work with. Um, how do you keep the audience's attention? That was always the hard one. And that's why we leaned so much into the sound design and the score and the music throughout it. Like it was always player one. Um, because you're building the world and you don't see the world, and everyone walks out of that saying, look, I feel like I've visited Alderney. And I wondered if there was a really kind of challenging aspect for you composing this track, whether it was in the making of it or in the composition of it.
I think A Meadow of White Flowers might have been one of the most fluent compositional processes I've
Mm.
ever had. I mean, the main theme, the development, it actually came out quite easily. I don't know if that sounds, I don't know if that sounds bad, but actually it was so incredibly natural
Yeah.
writing the score for this piece. Um, it's unlike anything else I write, which is usually a very laborious back and forth, for several months kind of task. I think the challenge was finding the right piano sound, because the question was, do I use an upright piano? Do I use a grand piano? Is it a large grand piano? Is it like a kind of concert hall kind of space? Is it like an upright piano where it's very intimate? I lean towards upright piano because the space is very small in the film, and that will maintain a sense of intimacy and claustrophobia. But then when I was thinking about A Meadow of White Flowers and the actual metaphor of that, that's an expansive image. It's not something that's contained, in a small room on a soft piano. So I then leaned towards the sort of medium-sized grand piano. So that part of the process, the choosing the right instrument, that was the challenging part, actually, rather than the composition.
And as you said, it was a very easy process. I it was an easy process for me.
I mean, sometimes the difficult process, you're going through it and you know it's difficult, and you think, okay, well, through this difficulty, something amazing will emerge. And then sometimes people say, if it feels easy, maybe you're not going to make the right thing. I don't know. But actually, this is one of those occasions where the process was both fluent and the result was it's just right. Everything just slotted into place. It was like Tetris, I suppose. Just everything kind of lined up.
Yeah, everything did line up. Alexander, I know you got to get off, so I'll stop this now. But it's just been fantastic to chat to you about On the Line, and I'm so lucky to have had you on board.
That's very kind. It's been a pleasure.